good afternoon and welcome back to the Analyst of Vajiram and Ravi. Today is 19 January and here are the following articles of relevance today. So the first topic is about critical minerals, which is very important not only from mains point of view but also for prelims examination. Here we will read what are these minerals and what imparts them criticality. We will also look into multiple aspects as to what are its significance and how its significances are challenged by some of the issues surrounding them. So we will have a holistic look into what are critical minerals. Then in the second topic, we will do the case and viability analysis of the sub-categorization of SCs, as recently a 5-membered panel has been formed to assess the same. Then from prelims point of view, we'll be reading 3 topics. The first among them is a very important one, the genetically modified crops. This is in light of the recently ongoing Supreme Court row for the GM mustard crop. And then from mapping point of view, we'll be reading about the South China Sea and what are the associated disputed islands. And finally, we will wind up the discussion with what is human papillomavirus, which disease does it cause, and why Indian government has recently initiated a vaccination drive against this virus. So let's begin the discussion. So our first topic of discussion is critical mineral. So this is in context because recently Coal India has made a bid to mine the critical minerals of India. The first question is coal a critical mineral? No. Then what are the critical minerals? To understand that, let's first understand that minerals can be either abundant in nature or can be rare earth minerals. They can be metallic, they can be non-metallic. All of them essentially can also form critical mineral. So any mineral which has got 2 factors assigned to it. First is its essentiality, its utmost significance in the economic growth and national security. And second factor is its vulnerability. So first factor, essentiality, and second factor, the vulnerability. Vulnerability, why? Because of the pattern of distribution are across the world. In some of the pockets, it will be heavily abundant, whereas in the other pockets, it will be very, very dispersed, not economically viable to be mined. And therefore, these critical minerals, we are dependent on a particular supply chain for this. This supply chain is very complex in nature. It gets extracted from somewhere, mined from somewhere, processed in some other country, transported in some another country, and then used in some another country. So this is a very complex supply chain around it. Because of the complex supply chain and because of the limited availability of these minerals, they are very, very vulnerable. Therefore, because their supply is vulnerable, why their demand is very, very high because of their essentiality, such minerals are known as the critical minerals. Now, some examples of these critical minerals are, for example, lithium, because the electric vehicle batteries are all driven by the lithium. Therefore, lithium becomes a very critical mineral because we know that it is it is abundant only in few pockets of the world. For example, the lithium triangle of South America, in China and Australia, etc. Then, for example, in some medical industries, in some instruments like conducting radiotherapy or in MRIs, you need critical minerals like helium, uranium, etc. So, there is utmost significance of critical minerals because without them, the economy or many other sectors of the economy will collapse. Therefore, there is very intrinsic criticality and essentiality to these minerals. Now, how many critical minerals does India have? So, there are no set standards as to a particular mineral has to be critical or not. There is no unified critical mineral database. But it is variable for different countries. Say, for example, according to a country's need, for example, USA says that I need 50 critical minerals. So, USA has designated about 50 minerals as critical. UK has designated only about 18 minerals as critical for its economy. India, on the other hand, has declared up to 30 minerals as critical minerals by amending the MMDR, that is Mines and Minerals Regulation and Development Act of 1957 under the amendment of 2023. So here we understood that India currently has 30 critical minerals. What are these minerals? We can broadly categorize them into 2 forms. One are those which are very important for industries, and second which is important for agriculture. So for those which are important for industries are copper, lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements, silicon, tin, titanium, tungstens and others. And also there are certain minerals very important for agriculture. These are the non-metallic minerals, the minerals which are required in fertilizers. These are potash and phosphorus. So we know that critical minerals are not only the metallic, but they are also the non-metallic minerals. They are not only the abundant minerals, but also the rare earth minerals. Once we have understood this, you must also acknowledge the importance of this topic from prelims point of view. Because in the last year, in 2023 prelims examination, a question was asked on titanium. The correct answer was titanium. And eventually, UPSC has been of late asking many questions around what are the major minerals, what are the minor minerals, and now also what are the critical minerals becomes important to us. So therefore, I would suggest you to have a thorough analysis of all these critical minerals, all the 30 minerals and their applications. Now, we have understood that there are two components to it. One, the essentiality. The essentiality is promoted by its significance, its enormous significance, especially in today's world. So what are its particular significances? Let's study in detail. First of all, it is the driver of economic growth for any country, because it ultimately drives multiple other sectors. For example, the transport and communication sector, the telecommunication sector, the aerospace, the energy sector, the defense sector, all of them have one thing in common, one component in common, that is the prevalence of critical minerals in their components. So therefore, when you have a stable and diverse supply of these critical minerals, then you can also ensure the productivity of all these multiple sectors of the economy, eventually leading to stable and sharp economic growth of the country. First of all, significance is about the economic growth. Second, it is used to develop the high-end technological devices and technological gadgets that can only be made possible once you have critical minerals, for example, neodymium and dysprosium. They can help you to form the permanent magnets, which will not only be useful in having gadgets, developing multiple gadgets, but also developing electric vehicles and also developing your bullet trains. So it has got vast advantage when you talk about developing the high-end gadgets or high-end technological products. That also helps them to be a very good security provider for the nation. Because once you get the capability, the technology and the components, that is the critical minerals, for developing such devices, such technologies, it will not only help you to boost the security infrastructure, but it will also help you to have better surveillance. You can have them installed, you can have better submarines, you can have better missiles, you can have better satellites, all of them with the help of critical minerals. So they are also very intrinsic in the national security. One good example is the use of tungsten. And finally, it also helps us to achieve smooth energy transition from fossil fuel based vehicles. So for example, I want to have a transition from my vehicle, which is driven by fossil fuel, to an electric vehicle. What would I require? I would require electric batteries, and these electric batteries will be driven by critical minerals like lithium, like cobalt, like nickel, which are not very abundant in my country. So I will be dependent on other countries for them. So my equation with other countries will also hamper my country's development and growth in the energy transition. So therefore, they are important to reduce the dependence on the fossil fuel related infrastructure and eventually mitigate the climate change in the longer run. Now, these significances are compromised by some of the challenges that are there with critical minerals. So these challenges are, first of all, their very limited availability. You know that rare earth minerals are one among the critical minerals. What's up with rare earth minerals? They're actually rare not because they're not abundant. They're very much abundant across the surface of the earth, but they are not found in abundant concentration in one place so that it becomes economically viable to extract them. Such is the case for critical minerals as well. You will only find them limited to only some countries, to only some terrains. Therefore, there is a visible dominance of certain countries like China, like your Brazil, like Australia, like Russia, which can be seen, and many of the other countries, especially which are trying to grow their technological advancements, they are heavily dependent on these countries, their relations with these countries and import of these minerals from these countries. Next is associated geopolitical risk. As I have already told you, they are very limited. They are very limited, their concentration is limited. Therefore, that any kind of disaster, if it has happened, or any kind of pandemic, for example covid saw a lot of trade disruption, because of which the many industries that were driven by critical minerals, for example electric vehicle industry, for example semiconductor industry, all of that saw a slump during the covid time because of the trade disruption. So any kind of vulnerability in the complex supply chain will also affect, and that vulnerability could be due to pandemic, could be due to any disaster of that country where these minerals are found, or because it has been seeing some politically unstable regime, civil wars are going on. These can be impediments in having a robust and a resilient supply chain. And therefore, during the time of COVID, India and Australia came together to form the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative to combat this impediment. The next one is the increasing demand of critical mineral, because everybody is going towards, every country wants to technologically advance themselves, wants to go towards the Industrial Revolution 4.2, which has got silicon chips in its core. Silicon itself is a critical mineral. Secondly, we all want to mitigate climate change at our own levels. We all want to achieve our own naturally determined contributions. So how to do that? Again, we need to use some critical minerals. Therefore, the global demand of critical mineral is on a peak high. Therefore, because high demand is there and supply is limited or supply is vulnerable, therefore, it poses great challenge for us to use, utilize, produce and basically take the full use of critical minerals for our economic growth. And finally, we have also got huge reliance on the foreign partners. For example, China, for example, Australia, etc. And it also causes huge losses on our balance of trade. It also enhances our fiscal deficit. Then there are certain environmental and social concerns with respect to their extraction and processing, because they can be harmful for consumption. For example, uranium, though it is very critical, very essential for us, but at the same time, unnecessary or unsustainable extraction and processing of uranium can cause large harm to the lives. So therefore, these are certain challenges associated with critical mineral. So then what other nations, especially India, needs to do in order to ensure resilient supply? The first thing is to get Atmanirbharta in the production of lithium or in the production of critical minerals. It's not that India doesn't have it, but India hasn't explored the potential of critical minerals yet. And therefore, this amendment in MMDR was made. The first thing India needs to do is to develop its own domestic sources. For example, some can be found in Telangana, some in Jammu Kashmir, some in Bihar. Different sources, different supply of critical minerals have been found. As the mines or as the mining of critical minerals is taken up by Government of India and by other private agencies. So we need to promote exploration and mining activities not only from private sector but also from public sector. Second, we need to encourage responsible mining practices so that they do not cause negative environmental impact and also negative impact on the health of animals and humans. So responsible mining practices needs to be taken place. Second, we need a specialized agency. While we need to boost our investment in the research and development, R&D associated with the critical minerals, we also need to ensure that we develop a specialized agency which takes care of the entire analytics, assessment, research and development related to critical minerals of the country. So this has already been done by Australia by setting up CSIRO. And India can also set up National Institute or Center of Excellence dedicated to critical minerals on the similar lines. Then we need to promote transparency in the supply chain. So what happens in a supply chain? You are, say for example, extracting from China. Then it goes to Vietnam for processing. And then it comes to India for consumption. In this manner, the transparency is one of the issues that the final country or the end consumer of the critical mineral or the product that has been created using it, the final country faces this challenge. So we need to ensure that there is transparency in the supply chain, and supply chain resilience initiative is a very good step taken by India. And finally, in order to achieve all of this, we need to develop a holistic critical mineral strategy. So we need to have a national critical mineral strategy which identifies the priority minerals, which promotes domestic exploration and mining, which promotes sustainable and responsible mining practices so that we utilize critical minerals at its best to give impetus to our economic growth. Now, coming to the next topic, this is about the sub-categorization of scheduled castes. So why is this in news? Because recently a 5-membered committee of secretaries from various different ministries have came together, formed a panel, and have been tasked to find a fair way to identify and distribute the benefits to the most disadvantaged sections within the scheduled caste. So this is the task that they will be performing, and meanwhile a 7-member or a 7 judges bench has also been constituted by the Supreme Court to look into this matter. So there is a huge impetus given by the government, the judiciary and the executive to facilitate the sub-categorization of scheduled caste. So let's have a deeper look into this topic. So first of all, what is sub-categorization? So sub-categorization is basically classification of a minority community into subclasses on the basis of their socio-economic conditions. Why are we doing this? So that the most disadvantaged groups gets benefits on priority basis, so that uniform development of all these subgroups takes place. Because as we know that most of the benefits that are accorded by the constitution and the government to the minority communities, for example OBCs and SCs, are majorly chunked out by the creamy layer, the most advantaged in the dominant group, leaving the other groups further marginalized. So therefore there is a need for subcategorization. Already subcategorization of OBC is going on, and now the case of subcategorization of SC is in news. Now, the demand of subcategorization for SC has been taken up by various states like your Punjab. Punjab has been there. There's been Telangana, Tamil Nadu. They have already been voicing their opinions, their demands for subcategorization. But one community which has put up the current PIL in the Supreme Court regarding the subcategorization, and one community which has been a pioneer in asking for this demand, has been the Madiga community of Telangana. What is the case with them? That first of all, they have been the most populous SC community in Telangana. But even after being that, they are the ones who have been least represented, or at least they have not been adequately represented. The most representation have been taken by the Mala community. Now, because of this, a PIL was formed by the Madiga community. Now, before getting into what were the impact of this PIL and what were the impact of this demand that Madiga has been asking since 1994, let's also check out some of the prelims facts regarding the same. So first of all, what are the states with no scheduled caste community? There are total 4 states in India. 2 are from Northeast, one that is Arunachal Pradesh, second is Nagaland, because majority is scheduled tribe. So there is no scheduled caste designated over there. Then 2 are the island nations, one the Lakshadweep Island and then the Andaman and Nicobar Island. So these 4 states have got no scheduled caste community. This is important from prelims point of view. Second, President has the power to notify and declare the list of the scheduled caste under Article 341 of the Constitution. And this list is specific state-wise. So if a person or if a community is designated as scheduled caste in one state, doesn't mean that it is uniformly acknowledged as scheduled caste across the India. It will be variable for state. So these are some of the facts. And one more question, that which state has got the maximum or the majority of SC community? Please tell me in the comment box. So these were some of the facts. Now, what was the impact of the Madiga community's demand? First of all, the first action was taken up by Supreme Court by setting up a Ramachandra Raju Commission in 1996. This also validated their need for having or demanding the subcategorization of scheduled caste. It also led to establishment of a national commission in the year 2007. The statutory body was now given a constitutional status. Then in 2020, in the Devinder Singh case, Supreme Court bench again unanimously ruled that subcategorization is in fact constitutionally valid, and it suggested that the larger constitutional bench needs to be made to check or to have provisions for the same. So therefore, a 7-member judge or a 7-judge bench has been created to check the matter in this regards. Now let's assess the viability of subcategorization of SCs. To understand that, let's first understand what are the arguments in favor. Why do we need subcategorization? See, caste in India is nothing but a form of graded inequality. It is a form of graded inequality with depleting levels or conditions of socio-economic of the multiple communities. And within these communities, there is again further graded inequality found. So therefore, it addresses the graded inequality prevalent within the community or the intra-community graded inequalities. These inequalities could be the depleting access to basic facilities like education, sanitation, healthcare, etc. And also the degrading opportunities, degrading access to opportunity, because most of the privileges that are given to these minority communities, they have been chunked out by the creamy layer. So therefore, here the most disadvantaged group is one which is found in the last grades. So therefore, we need to uplift the lower rungs, and for that we need to have sub-categorization first of all. So for example, in Tamil Nadu, the Arundhatiyar caste has got 16% population within its scheduled caste community, and despite getting that, it has got 0 to 5% of the total representation in the jobs. So we need to make sure that each sector, each subgroup is uniformly represented, uniformly empowered, and not just the creamy layer within a minority community. That is the first argument. Second is to facilitate Antyodaya, that is upliftment of the last mile beneficiary. So what happens? Why do we see the degrading levels of the access to basic facility or opportunities? That is because the government privileges, benefits, schemes are not even reaching the people who are belonging to the last mile. So in order to give them the priority delivery of service, we need to first of all identify them and then deliver Antyodaya to them, so that government facilities are penetrated on a priority basis to the most lower subgroups or most disadvantaged subgroups. Then finally, it will also help the entire scheduled caste community to gain social mobility. What is social mobility? It is the upward mobility, having better economic social conditions as compared to the previous generations. Now this can be secured once the conflicts and the competition within the group, within intra-group competition and conflicts are reduced. So government needs to ensure that the reservation policy is effectively used by all the sections, all the subgroups, and not just by the creamy layer. And therefore, government says that first of all, we need to have sub-categorization, then only we need to have priority delivery, priority designation of the services, and also we need to have reservations on priority basis. These are some of the arguments in favor. Then what are the arguments against sub-categorization? First of all, it doesn't addresses the very root cause of the graded inequality. See, this graded inequality is because there is degrading levels of access and opportunity that we have already understand. Now, when I'm trying to give you reservation, when I'm trying to subcategorize, I essentially want to have equal representation from all the levels. I want to take representation from here, here and here. But let's say a competitive examination is going on, let's say civil services is going on. Now I have given 15% reservation to the scheduled caste community. The above two rungs have been able to educate themselves, have been able to take care of the benefits by government. But what about the third one? What about the most lowest one, the most disadvantaged group? It has not been accorded, not been facilitated with the basic education facilities. How will it compete within its group? How will it compete with this 15% reservation seat? So the first thing is, it doesn't address the root cause. The root cause is first of all to give positive discrimination and more impetus to the most disadvantaged group, and then only we will bring all of them in an equal level, and then only our reservation policy will be effective, or our representation policy or aims to have fair representation, equal representation will be fruitful. Then there are issues of federalism as well. Who will do the subcategorization? Ideally, state should do. State have the best knowledge of who needs to be subcategorized, but it's not in the hands of state. So in E.V. Chennaiya versus State of Andhra case, Supreme Court upheld that state has got no powers to delimit or to identify the subcategorization. It can only be done by the Parliament and the President of the India. Then there are challenges related to the identification and criteria. If there is lack of transparent criteria, then it will also lead to internal conflicts or social conflicts within these communities. Second, obtaining accurate data in order to create these transparent criteria, that is also a very big challenge. And finally, when both of them fail, then what happens? It eventually creates social tension within. within the community, which essentially diminishes the returns that we are expecting. It eventually degrades the social mobility. It further creates tensions and conflicts among the community itself, and finally it beats the very purpose. So then what needs to be done? Essentially, we need to strike a middle path. So for that, first of all, we need to explore multiple alternatives as to how subcategorization will be done. So there are multiple ways to it. First of all, doing a constitutional amendment. This case has been made by the Attorney General of India. Then the National Commission for SC and ST though argue that there is no need to make a constitutional amendment in this regard, because in the Article 16 clause 4 there is already a provision in which, or utilizing which, we can create subcategorization within the caste if we find the need to do so. Then Usha Mehra committee recommended that there should be inclusion or introduction of a subclause 3 within the Article 16.4, which empowers the state legislatures to identify the subcategories within the scheduled caste. And then we also need to adhere to the concept of creamy layer, that is, demarcating these subgroups or classification on the basis of income levels. This has already been upheld by Supreme Court in the Jarnail Singh versus Lakshmi Narayan Gupta case of 2018. And finally, we need to have a proper caste-based census and evidence-based criteria as to how we are going and on what basis we are going to designate this classification and identify these subgroups, so that it doesn't lead to social tensions within them. So this way we'll be able to holistically empower, comprehensively empower the entire minority community. Now coming to the third topic, this is the genetically modified crops, and this is in news because Supreme Court has reserved its judgment on the PIL challenging government to move for the commercial release of a food crop, the GM mustard variant DMH, Dhara mustard hybrid 11. Now this is very important from prelims point of view. So let's understand what are genetically modified crops. These are those crops whose genes have been artificially modified by crossing the species, leading to creation of products that have desired traits. Desired traits could be higher yield or could be resistance against pests, tolerance for pesticides, herbicides, etc. So, in order to get these desired traits, genetical engineering is done in the crops, and these crops are known as genetically modified crops. So this is one of the applications of biotechnology. Now, as I have told you that this is a kind of cross-breeding of the species. So cross-breeding is not a new thing. It has been done conventionally also. So what happened? What is the advantage of a genetically modified crop as compared to the conventional plant breeding or a conventional crossing of species? So for example, I have got two species from same genus. For example, there is a marigold plant and there is a rose plant. So in order to create a mixed product of having some desired traits, I will be mixing both of these genes together, and this is what I call as crossbreeding. But one limitation in this kind of conventional crossbreeding is that it can only be done within one family or within one genus. So there is a genus barrier. You cannot crossbreed in this manner. You cannot crossbreed, say, for example, a flower with some animal gene. But in the case of genetic modification, this is made possible. Here, you can infuse in this marigold not only a gene from another plant, but also from another animal or also from a bacterium. And therefore, desired trait can be engineered very, very effectively. So this is about genetically modified crop. What are the examples of genetically modified crops in India? The first crop to be approved and to be commercialized was the BT cotton. BT cotton having the genes from soil bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis. And then BT brinjal. This is a food crop which has been developed but not commercialized yet by India. This is having the Cry1AC gene of this BT bacterium. So as you can see that we have infused a soil bacterium into a plant. This can only be made possible by genetic modification. Therefore, they are known as genetically modified crops. Now, what about the crop in case? This is the DMH, Dhara mustard hybrid 11. This is a GM variant of an already developed or a hybrid crop, which is herbicide, the HT mustard, the herbicide tolerant mustard. which is resultant of a crossbred. Crossbred from two things. First of all, the indigenous variety of mustard, the Varuna one, and East European variety, Early Hira. So please be mindful that in the state PCS or in the prelims examination, Varuna and Early Hira can be asked, and then you will be made to answer that what does it belong to. So please be mindful of these two keywords. Now, it has not only got the cross breeding of these two species of mustard, but has also got alien genes in it. These two alien genes are coming again from the soil bacterium. This is the name. And these soil bacteriums are from Barnes and Barstar. These are the names. Again, these names are important from prelims point of view. What does it ensures? It ensures first of all herbicide tolerance. Second, it ensures high yield of up to 28% more than the conventional mustard crops of India. So therefore, central government has been making a case that unnecessarily boycotting the GM crop, the mustard crop. Actually in India, none of the food crop has been allowed yet for commercial production. It is only the non-food crop like the BT cotton which has been approved for commercialization. So there has been PIL in the Supreme Court regarding banning or forbidding the commercializing of the mustard crop, and central government has made the case that we are already importing many kinds of oil that are generated from the GM crops outside. So why don't we do it for ourselves, which will also help us to safeguard our food security. So what is the legal position of GM crops in India? This is again very important from prelims point of view. Now, who ensures or who gives the approval for a genetically modified crop which has been probably created by some scientific institution? Who's the statutory authority for this? This is the GEAC, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, which has been formed. This is a statutory body formed under the Environment Protection Act of 1986, and it works under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And it is again headed by, it is not headed by Prime Minister or any minister, it is rather headed by additional or special secretary from Ministry of Environment. So this is the apex body that allows for the commercial release of the GM crops in India. The first of its kind approval was made for BT cotton in the year 2002, and that is the only working BT GM crop in India. And what is the punishment? What if you produce unapproved GM variant in your fields? Then you will be liable for, or you will be attracting a jail term of 5 years and a fine up to 1 lakh rupees. So this is the legal position of the GM crops in India. Now from mapping point of view, let's start doing the mapping of South China Sea. Why is this in news? Because of the tense confrontation going on between China and Philippines regarding the disputed islands of the South China Sea. So let's have a quick look into this. South China Sea and Red Sea are two very important seas from prelims point of view this year. So please take good notes of it, have detailed analysis. They have also been asked by UPSC in the PYQs. So first of all, let's understand the location and have geographical understanding of the South China Sea. South China Sea is one among the marginal seas located in the western part of Pacific Ocean. It borders multiple countries like China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, Taiwan, etc. And because it is surrounded by multiple countries and also by the problematic China, therefore, there are multiple islands which are heavily disputed here, which raises tension in the South China Sea. South China Sea is important not just for China or for the surrounding countries, but also for the entire world because of its extreme strategic and economic importance. Here is where 1/3 of the global shipping passes. Here is where 1/3 of the marine food resources, oil and gas reserves are located. Therefore, this is a point of concern not just for the surrounding countries, but also for giants like Russia, like USA, like India, etc. Now, all of the point of conflict starts with the 9-dash line. But before understanding the 9-dash line, let's also geographically understand the two straits. The two straits which connects East China Sea with South China Sea. This is located westward to Taiwan. This is the Taiwan Strait, also known as the Formosa Strait. Then the Philippines Sea. The Philippines Sea and South China Sea again are connected by a strait which is known as Luzon Strait. So we'll learn these two straits as well, which are important for both China and Philippines as the tussle is going on. Now, the conflict starts with the story of 9-line. So, 9-line is basically that territory within which China claims more than 90% of the area, 19% of the waters, claiming that it has got some historical advantage, has got its history associated with this region. So therefore, China claims majority of this territory inside, maritime territory inside the 9-line. Is it approved by UN clause? No, because according to the rules of UN clause, the United Nations Convention on the Laws of Sea, which has been formed in 1982, it says that a country cannot have its jurisdiction outside 200 kilometers from its boundary. But here is China claiming about 80% of the territory, more than 80% of the territory in the South China Sea. And that is the point of contention brought forward by other surrounding countries, especially by Philippines. So here, Beijing shared the first rendering of its 9-line in the year 1997, though the idea of 9-line and its historical claims have been since 1947. But for the first time, it was politically rendered in its map in 1997. And then in 2013, Philippines challenged China's claim because UN clause was already formed. So in the tribunal, in the arbitration tribunal of UN clause, it was declared that China has got no official claims, no legitimate claims inside this South China Sea, and said that China has to respect the laws of sea and restrict its jurisdiction up to the exclusive economic zone, that is up to 200 kilometers of its territorial waters. Now, what are the contested areas that are in news? So, these areas are very, very important. They can be asked in the form of match the column. These are the Paracel Island, the Spratly Island and the Scarborough Shoal. This is the main area of contention between Philippines and China. So let's see what are the multiple nations which are claiming their rights over these islands. So first of all, you also need to understand the sequence because that can also be asked. So in the northernmost area, there is Paracel Island. It has been claimed by China. It has been claimed by China, as you can see. In the vicinity is also Vietnam, and then there's also Taiwan. So it has been claimed by China, Taiwan and Vietnam. Then next is the Scarborough Shoal, which is very, very close to Philippines. So Philippines says that it is historically its land. Philippines adhere its claim to it, and then it is also claimed by China, and then it is also claimed by Taiwan and Vietnam. Then there is Spratly Island in the southernmost region. This is a southernmost contested island. So Spratly Islands are claimed by Taiwan, China, Vietnam, Brunei and Philippines. So which island has been claimed by majority of the bordering nations? It is a Spratly Island. So this was all about South China Sea from prelims point of view. Now let's talk about the last topic of the day. This is human papillomavirus. Now this is in news because Government of India intends to initiate a 3-phased vaccination drive against this HPV virus. So what is this virus doing? This virus is responsible for creating cervical cancer, a kind of sexually transmitted disease. Just as how we read about AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This is given by HIV virus. Similarly, the cervical cancer which is developed in the cervix of females, the cervical cancer is given by or is transmitted by HPV virus. It is not that the cervical cancer is only caused by HPV, but HPV is responsible for causing 90% of the cases of cervical cancer. And we have got huge cervical cancer because cervical cancer, first of all, burdens women the most. Therefore, this is also very important from social justice point of view for providing social empowerment to women. So first of all, 4th common form of cancer in the world. 1 in 4 deaths in the world is caused due to cervical cancer. In India, it is the second most common form of cancer, and India has got the largest share of cervical cancer in the world. Therefore, calling upon the need for the Indian government to set up a vaccination drive for girls from 9 years to 14 years. Now, as I've already told you that the mode of transmission is through contact. It is a contagion disease, so it is caused due to sexual transmission. It not only affects the females, but surprisingly, it also affects the male. So, if a statement comes that HPV only infects female or cervical cancer is only seen in female, that would be a very abrupt statement. You can cancel it out. Then, one of the most successfully treated form of cancer is also the cervical cancer, given that we quickly identify and treat it. So there are multiple vaccinations created against this cervical cancer, HPV virus, attacking the HPV virus in multiple strains. There are multiple strains of HPV virus found, but there are multiple vaccines to address them as well. So a bivalent vaccine which addresses or which attacks two types or two variants of HPV virus, that is HPV variant 16 and 18, is the Cervarix. This is not indigenous, not developed by India. Then there is Gardasil. Gardasil is quadrivalent because it treats four types of HPV viruses: 16, 18, HPV 31, HPV 33. Then comes the indigenous counterpart, that is the India's indigenously developed HPV vaccine developed by Serum Institute of India. This is the Cervavac. And Cervavac is also quadrivalent similar to Gardasil. It attacks all the four forms of this HPV virus. The most effective, having the widest spectrum, is the Gardasil 9, which covers about 9 types of HPV virus. This is very effective, but it is not available in India yet. So this is how we have quickly summarized what is HPV virus. Which disease does it cause? What is the burden of that disease in global level and India level? So this is all about today's discussion. I hope you have liked it. Kindly give your reviews about the same. Thank you so much and have a nice day.